All right, for this question, I'm going to have to make some assumptions because I'm not sure what it is that you've been working on in class. When I read this question, I'm reading it as a Z-score question. One of the reasons for that is that I can use Z as long as my sample size is large, and we have a sample size of 116, so our N is sufficiently large to do that. So I would approach this as a Z-score problem. The other alternative would be a T-score problem, and that's usually for smaller n. And usually the information that would be given would be your sigma and not your standard deviation. So that's how I would make that decision when I'm reading the information from the question. And so what we're trying to accomplish here is when we read the information and they're telling us that we want to find the possibility, the hypothesis is that we are saying that the null is that the average is 250 and that all of the other distances don't differ significantly from that. And in statistics, that basically means that they're equal, even though they're not the same number. They're close enough that they're considered to be in the normal range, and so they're called equal. If it's significantly different than the mean, then this alternative or alternate hypothesis is what we would expect, which is that there's a significant difference, that mu is really quite a bit bigger than the mean, that we're, we have a big difference between those two groups. So that makes this a one-tailed test. If you think about a normal curve, that's where the tail idea comes from, and your mu is your mean going right through the middle. Then a one-tailed test means, sorry, I just had to stop that for a minute because my cell phone rang. So, okay, coming back to the idea of the one-tailed test, and what we're looking to show is that the actual driving distance that the golfers are showing is in this extreme region. It's just to the right, so it's the actually of the highest scores away from the mean. The lowest scores don't count because we're saying that the mean, that these scores have to be higher than the mean. That's what the greater than symbol means. All right, so what you're being asked for is the test statistic and the p-value, and then in part C they're asking you about a two-tailed test, and so a two-tailed test will change things just slightly. One of the things that you're going to need to do this is a I think a Z-score. No, maybe you don't. Okay. Let's start with the test statistic. So in this case, we said that we're going to set it up as a Z-score. And so if we start with a Z-score, switch over to red so you can see it better. The Z-score formula is that you take your raw value minus your mean over your standard deviation, and that's going to give us a Z-score. So in this case, if we put in the 251.1 as our raw score, and we minus the 250, which is our set mean that they told us, and our standard deviation is 49.6, we're going to get a Z-score, okay? That Z-score is our test statistic, which is hard to say. If you go to a Z-score chart, or if you are using our studio and you're using the pnorm command on our studio because you're looking for the percentile or the percent of the golfers who would be below that score, then you go there and you look it up and you're going to get a p-value. Okay, so whatever you get for your Z-score here, that's your test statistic. I'll call it TS, and so that would be the answer that would go in the A blank. For part B of your question, when you're looking for your p-value, what you want to do is go to the Z chart or use your pnorm command on your chart, actually. Pnorm on your chart and look up the percent of the population that's under this curve. It's the area under the curve, or the what they would call the percentage on your chart, okay? That will give you an answer for B, for your p-value. Now, when we look at C says if this was a two-tailed test, then enter the p-value. So just looking at that question and looking at the information that you're given, if we go back for a minute to B, and I said you should take the probability from your chart, there's one more step there that I should have included, and that is that you want to then do either 1 minus the p-value that you get, so 1 minus the answer from your chart, or on Q or on RStudio, you would ask it for Q norm instead of P norm, because what they're actually asking you for is how big is this region, not how big is this region in your normal curve. So in other words, what percent of the population fall in the critical region of your curve. And so your p-value is going to be that. For part C, I think what they're getting at with part C is the idea that if we didn't care if it was lower or higher than the mean, but just significantly different one way or the other, then that makes it a two-tailed test. And in terms of the p-value in that case, what usually happens is we would split the difference in terms of how we define this critical region here. The thing that's confusing me about this question, the way it's worded, is that it didn't give you a significance value. Usually it will say to 95% significance or 99% significance. And I don't see that here with this question. Normally what happens is we would be comparing R value to a Z value for the significance level. And so for instance, if we started with it saying 95% significance, if they change it from a one-tailed to a two-tailed test, the difference that makes is that this is a 5% if it was just the right tail, because 95% would be below it. But now if I change it and I make the left and the right tail included in that, then the left tail and the right tail have to add up to that 5% so that we can still have 95% in the middle. And so that would change your p-value when you are comparing it to the Z crit from the table. But because you're not given the significance value, it's hard to change that. I'm not really sure how you can change that according to the information that you're given. So I don't know if that confuses you more or helps explain what they're asking here. But in this particular problem, I'm not sure that it's possible to answer part C. I will make you more videos on the other two questions that you sent me, and they do have the significance level as part of the question, at least the next one does, and so maybe once you've seen that, it will help you to go back and look at your examples and see if you can figure out what they're looking for part C.